This man has a strange ritual. Every time he drinks 5 liters of water, he forces himself to do 300 push-ups. Even when his face turns red from holding it in, he clenches his teeth and refuses to go to the bathroom. The reason? He's been training and punishing his body relentlessly, waiting for the perfect chance to escape. And finally, today that chance has arrived. It starts with a simple breakfast of soybeans in the prison cafeteria. He asks his friend to pile his plate full. But he doesn't eat them right away because the real star of the plan hasn't shown up yet. Right on cue, the prison warden arrives for a surprise inspection. Seizing the moment, the man starts coughing violently as if 5 pounds of phlegm are choking his throat. It's clear something isn't right. Then, without warning, he spits a mouthful of soybeans all over the warden. The unexpected mess leaves the warden completely disgusted. Immediately, he orders the guards to escort the man to the infirmary. After a quick checkup, the doctor finds that he's simply had too much water. Nothing serious, just rest needed. And with that, step 1 of the escape plan is complete. Now it's time for step 2. He calmly tells the nurse he needs to use the restroom. Worried something might go wrong, the nurse offers him a bedpan and insists he relieve himself right there. "Please, don't make me use that," he begs. Just then, his janitor friend outside the room speaks up and offers to escort him to the toilet instead. The nurse hesitates but eventually agrees. She has no idea this was all part of the plan, discussed long ago. Once inside the bathroom, the man retrieves a hidden chisel stashed on the ceiling days earlier. With it, he starts chiseling open a tunnel gate. To his surprise, the gate gives way easily. It's like it was waiting for him. He patches things up just enough to hide the evidence and slips through the passage like nothing happened. But the escape isn't over. They haven't even left the prison grounds yet. A few days earlier, while working in the prison's wood shop, the man and his friend quietly built 2 wooden boxes. They secretly bolted these boxes to the underside of the prison supply truck. All they had to do now was climb inside. When the guards checked underneath the truck with mirrors, they saw nothing unusual. Without a second thought, the truck was cleared to leave. Once the truck stopped at the supplies warehouse, the 2 men slipped out quietly. Waiting nearby was an accomplice ready for the next phase of the plan. Back at the prison, guards began to notice the man had been gone too long from the restroom. So the janitor friend triggered a staged fight with a fellow inmate to create chaos. The brawl attracted guards and drew all eyes to the disturbance. This meant the prison warden was too distracted to notice a missing inmate. Everything was playing out exactly as planned. The next destination, a racetrack, but not for watching races. The real objective was the vault full of betting cash. Initially, the man refused. He had already given up crime and was just months from release. He had $90 million stashed at home. There was no need to risk everything for one last job. But then came the shocker. His friend told him that his brother had already dug up the stash and disappeared. Now, even the brother was nowhere to be found. Left with nothing, the man had no choice but to take on this high-stakes heist. To get him out, the long-haired guy intentionally crashed a car into a store just to steal 2 packs of instant noodles. He was sentenced to 90 days and got himself locked up in the same prison. So far, the plan was going off without a hitch. But the real challenge, getting back into prison after stealing the money. With the escape complete, the real clock was ticking. They needed to crack the vault's design fast. 2 inmates still inside the prison sent the racetrack staff a birthday cake, anonymously. Then, they sabotaged the woman's car. With her car out of commission, she had no choice but to leave the cake in the office fridge. That was all the duo needed. Disguised as repairmen, they snuck beneath the vault room. And then, they released dozens of cockroaches into the ventilation system. Attracted by the sweet smell, the insects quickly found their way to the cake. Naturally, the woman freaked out and called for pest control. And just like that, the repairmen blended in with the exterminators. They got a perfect look at the vault system and even snuck the door code. They relayed everything to the escapees through a payphone. With the code in hand, accessing the basement vault was a breeze. Next, the crew hit the card terminal station, blowing it up with a makeshift bomb hidden in a soda can. Now, bettors could no longer use cards cash only. And all of it would be funneled into the vault. Even though firefighters arrived quickly, repairs would take hours. Until then, every bet meant more and more cash being dumped into that vault. Within moments, it was stuffed with tens of millions of dollars. By now, the man had arrived at the racetrack. But instead of heading inside, he made a stop at a convenience store for beer. "Want to add 2 more bottles for just $10? The cashier asked. "Absolutely," he replied. His buddy was confused. What did beer have to do with anything? Then, he grabbed 2 packs of gummy candies as well. With the goods in hand, the long-haired guy took him to a garbage dump. The man looked puzzled. "What are we doing here? What's underneath? Why are you lying down?" he asked, confused. Before he could react, the long-haired guy shoved him in. Turns out this was a hidden tunnel straight to the basement. And just above, the race had already begun. With everyone distracted by the noise and excitement, no one noticed what was happening beneath. Using the maps they'd memorized, the crew reached the vault's underbelly. The long-haired guy's brother was already waiting there. He handed the man a bottle of correction fluid and a plastic bag. Both brothers were confused. Could these things really blow open a vault? Without a word, the man poured the candies and fluid into the bag. Then he twisted it shut and handed it over like it was a grenade. "Wait, that's it?" they asked. "Are we really trusting this bottle to blow stuff up?" Though skeptical, they passed him a tube to help guide the device. The bearded brother couldn't hold it in anymore. "You seriously think this homemade candy bomb will work?" He had never heard of gummy bears being used in explosives. Even with explanations, the science flew right over their heads. Inevitably, the argument began to heat up. Traditional bombs were too risky. This was their only option. Correction fluid is pure potassium chlorate, and sugar is glucose. Mix them, and you get two gases and one solid. Add a little heat, and boom, you've got yourself an explosion. Still confused, the brothers just nodded and followed instructions. Energy equals explosion. With no time left to debate, they moved forward with the candy bomb plan. The man carefully placed the plastic bag inside the bottle. Then, he slid the bottle into the cash transport pipe. Inside, the pipe was full of heat. They waited, but no explosion came. Instead, the bottle came rolling right back completely intact. It nearly smacked the long-haired guy in the face. Luckily, he caught it just in time. But now, he didn't dare move an inch. That thing could go off at any second. The man gently took it from him. As he tried to open the bottle, the brothers backed away fast. "I sealed the bag too tight," he said. He loosened the seal just a bit and placed the bag back inside. Then once again, slid the bottle back into the pipe. This time, under the heat, the bottle exploded with force. The cash pipe was blown wide open. Soon, thick smoke started filling the cafeteria above. Staff thought something had caught fire and called the control center. But oddly, there were no fire alarms going off. Still, just in case, they sent a team to investigate. Meanwhile, down below, the robbers rolled out a giant vacuum to suck money from the pipe. Within seconds, bills started pouring into their trash bins. But as the flow slowed down, one of them cranked the power up. Too much suction and money started spilling everywhere. Panicking, they redirected the vacuum to recover what they'd lost. But then another disaster struck. The long-haired guy's prosthetic arm got sucked into the hose, jamming the whole system. There was no point arguing. It was too late now. The priority was clear: fix the vacuum fast. But that arm, he'd worn it for 15 years. Losing it felt like losing his real arm all over again. He just couldn't let it go. Seeing this, the bearded brother gently talked him down. He promised to buy him a new one made of solid gold. Reluctantly, the long-haired guy nodded. He couldn't argue with that. With the vacuum working again, they stuffed bags full of cash and carried them out. But as soon as they turned a corner, they ran into security. Strangely, they didn't panic one bit. "We're just taking out the trash," they said. The guards sniffed. "Do you smell smoke?" "Nope," one of them replied. "We've had no sense of smell since childhood." Shockingly, the guard believed that ridiculous excuse. He let them go without a second thought. Just like that, they got away by a hair. But right as they reached the exit, another problem. For some reason, the main gate was jammed shut. It wouldn't budge. Meanwhile, back inside, the man was still counting cash. And two security guards were heading straight for him. If they spotted him now, it would all be over. However, this did not make it difficult for the smart robbers. One of them had hidden in the race car repair room, pretending to smoke a cigarette. He not only distracted the guards, but also cleverly redirected their suspicions toward himself. That way, no one would suspect the smoke was from an explosion. Back in the basement, the rest of the cash had been packed up. But the two couriers were still missing. Worried, the man rushed out to check on them. Every second they delayed increased the risk of getting caught. The race above could end at any moment. Once it did, someone was bound to inspect the vault room. Just as the smoker was about to leave, he saw the man running toward him. To stall, he continued distracting the guards, buying his team more time. But when the man arrived, he found the other two just standing there completely stuck. Even with him there, nothing changed. No matter how hard they turned the switch, the gate just wouldn't open. The man had no immediate solution. Meanwhile, the bearded brother noticed his partner still hadn't returned and decided to move. He rushed toward the main gate. Just his luck, he ran right into the same two security guards. "Do you smell smoke?" they asked. "Smoke? Just race car exhaust," he said casually. With that smooth line, he dodged suspicion and joined his team. "Try pulling it out of the track," he said. "It's the chain, it's jammed." So, all this time, the problem was just a stuck chain. Once fixed, the couriers got moving again. The others headed back to the vault site. Meanwhile, the long-haired guy was still hunting for his prosthetic arm. Time was ticking, every second counted. Even the bearded guy's sister had to step in to help. Finally, after searching high and low, they found the missing arm. They tossed the cash into the garbage bin, then erased the chemistry formula scribbled on the wall. Next, they reconnected the broken cash pipe, then carefully wiped off all fingerprints. Every step was done with obsessive precision. Wherever they had touched, he wiped 10, 20 times just to be sure. They weren't leaving a single trace behind for the cops. As for the money, they wouldn't leave with it right away. Instead, they marked every bill and buried it in trash. After the race ended, they'd come back to dig it up. Now, the only thing left was to sneak the man back into prison, but they'd already figured out a way. Inside the prison, his buddies got to work. They smeared sesame all over every camera lens, then blocked the windows with cafeteria trays and foil. The goal? Prevent the warden from seeing anything inside. When the race on TV was nearly over, the return mission kicked off. One inmate unscrewed a metal needle from a guard's uniform. He wrapped it in tissue and stuck it into a power socket, creating a spark. Using that tiny fire, they set off the cafeteria's fire alarm. The warden was furious, but just in case something had gone wrong, he called the prison's own fire team. By then, the man and the long-haired guy had already changed into firefighter uniforms and were waiting nearby. As soon as the fire truck rolled out, they quietly climbed aboard. They rode the truck straight back into prison, completely unnoticed. When the fire team rushed off to investigate, the two slipped away unnoticed. They silently returned to the medical ward. Just as the firemen arrived at the scene, they realized it was nothing more than a prank by the inmates. Still, they played along, spraying a fire extinguisher into a trash can just for show. Moments later, the nurse came to check on the patient and found the man obediently lying in bed. She had no idea that in just a few hours, this patient had pulled off one of the most daring heists imaginable. Though investigators quickly arrived at the scene, it was too late. They couldn't find a single clue left behind. Tens of millions of dollars had vanished without a trace. But they did have one leader race car driver with a grudge against the long-haired guy. He and a teammate had stumbled across the crew in the underground tunnel, and they got beat up badly for it. The investigators immediately called in the prison warden. But the warden knew if the prison's involvement was exposed, his job was on the line. So he lied, pretending there had been no riot, no escape. He insisted the man had never left the prison at all. The investigators were now unsure who to trust. The case hit a dead end. But then, something even stranger happened. The bearded brother drove the getaway truck straight to a gas station. Moments later, he called the police and surrendered $20 million in cash. After doing that, he quietly disappeared. Meanwhile, the racetrack owner demanded a $100 million insurance payout even after recovering part of the money. Not long after, the long-haired guy was released from prison. Just when he thought he could finally enjoy the spoils of the heist, his sister gave him bad news. Their brother, the bearded one, had vanished, and he had voluntarily returned the stolen money. Meanwhile, back in prison, the man wasn't having it easy either. The warden still held a grudge from being spit on during the breakfast stunt. He insulted the man and beat him viciously, then threw him straight into solitary confinement. But the man didn't seem angry. In fact, he was oddly cheerful. Once free, he went straight to see the long-haired guy, because his release date was just around the corner. But he was met with shocking news. Their brother had disappeared, and had returned all the money to the racetrack owner. All that effort for nothing. Frustrated but helpless, the man returned home empty-handed. He had no idea what to do next until he heard urgent knocking at the door. But when he opened it, there was no one there, just a shovel lying in the hallway. He assumed it was someone's idea of a prank. But just as he turned to go back inside, something clicked. He grabbed the shovel and ran into his backyard. Without a word, he began to dig furiously. And there it was, bags of cash totaling $5 million. Turns out, the steel gate had been sabotaged on purpose by the bearded brother. It was all part of the plan, to throw everyone off his trail. He gave his sister the perfect window to sneak in. During those 10 critical minutes, she had stolen another $20 million from the vault. And that money, he had buried it along with the trash. When the time was right, he dug it up again. then divided the loot among everyone involved. Soon after, the inmate who had staged the prison chaos was released. Waiting outside, a luxury car stuffed with cash, just for him. Bag after bag of money. Even the heavyset woman who worked at the vault got a little emotional compensation. Fast forward a year, and the whole case had gone cold. Investigators never figured out what really happened. Eventually, the racetrack owner dropped all charges. And in the end it was the insurance company that took the biggest loss. Back at the bearded brother's house, a note hung on the wall. It listed the 10 commandments of thieves. One rule stood out: never be greedy. A movie's value lies in its story, and a review's value lies in how it makes you feel. That's the end of today's story. Thanks for watching. So, what did you think of this movie?